You get $15, Dad. That was my son's final offer, his voice dripping with the satisfaction of a man about to inherit his mother's $160 million fortune. He wanted me front and center at the will reading, just to watch my face when my worthlessness was read into legal record. What he didn't know was that my ex-wife, even in death, had one last move to play, and I was the centerpiece of it. Before I tell you how it unfolded, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and subscribe if you believe the quietest people plan the loudest endings. For 5 years, my workshop in Austin, Texas had been my whole world. The whine of the planer, the smell of sawdust and linseed oil, the honest curve of a rocking chair taking shape under my hands. Here I wasn't a disgraced architect or a discarded husband. I was just a carpenter. Then my old flip phone buzzed, and 2 words stared back at me. Nathan Thorne. 20 years without a call that wasn't a demand. I flipped it open. Nathan, your mother is gone, he said, flat as a news anchor. Stroke. Last week. I stood there numb. Isabella, that hurricane of ambition and brilliance, just gone. The funeral? I started to ask. He cut me off. It's over. You weren't on the list. The will reading is Friday, 10 sharp, Caldwell and Finch, Manhattan. Don't be late. I have no reason to be there, I said. Isabella and I settled everything 20 years ago. He laughed, an ugly, scornful bark. Oh, you're not getting a dime. This is a formality. I want to watch that fake dignity of yours crumble when you hear you're a zero. A pause, savoring it. Don't worry about the trip home. I'll spot you $15 for the bus. Click. I stood in the ringing silence, an old coal of anger stirring under 20 years of ash. He hadn't invited me to a will reading. He'd summoned me to a public execution. Fine. He would get a show. I went to my closet and pulled out the one suit I hadn't touched in 2 decades. The charcoal gray one I'd worn the day my old life ended. I would wear it again for the beginning of his. The offices of Caldwell and Finch swallowed the city's noise behind glass doors, replacing it with the hush of white marble and old money. I felt small in my 20-year-old suit, the crease still knife-sharp from my own ironing, smelling faintly of mothballs and a marriage that ended in a courtroom. Young lawyers glanced up, scanned, dismissed. I gave the receptionist my name. Confusion flickered. I wasn't what she expected of a Thorne. Please, have a seat, she said, smile not reaching her eyes. Then Nathan arrived, and he didn't walk in. He performed an entrance. Navy Tom Ford suit, slicked hair, a girlfriend named Sophia clutching a designer bag like a life raft, and a financial advisor named Kyle with a shark's fixed white smile. They weren't mourners. They were predators circling a kill. Nathan spotted me, and his face split into something cruel and delighted. My God, you actually came? I guess you really do need that $15, Sophia. She giggled, glass breaking. He turned to his entourage. This, he said, pausing to let the word land like an insult, is my father. Not an introduction, an apology for my existence. I said nothing. I just held his gaze until his smile tightened, unnerved by my silence more than any argument could have unnerved him. He turned away, already directing Kyle to start liquidating real estate, when the oak door opened and the room's temperature dropped. Mr. Harrison, gray-suited, 60, with a judge's unreadable face, swept the room with his eyes, passed over Nathan's entourage like furniture, and landed on me. Mr. Thorne, he said, warm and respectful. Thank you for coming. Only then did he turn to my son, voice gone cold. Mr. Thorne, the slight was surgical, and Nathan's jaw tightened. In the conference room, Nathan claimed the head seat like a king taking his throne. Harrison opened a thick leather binder and began reading Isabella's will in a flat legal monotone. $50,000 to her housekeeper Maria for 25 years of loyalty. Nathan scoffed, muttered peanuts. $100,000 to a butterfly preservation fund, and I felt a private ache. Isabella and I had once hiked into the Mexican mountains to see the monarchs, and she'd wept at their beauty. She'd remembered. $25,000 to her driver, for never commenting on the colorful guests my son brought to my home. Nathan flushed and slammed his hand on the table, demanding Harrison skip to the money. Harrison removed his glasses, stared at him with flat, unimpressed authority. This is not a negotiation. I will read every word your mother wrote, and you will listen. Nathan, for once, said nothing. The will turned its blade on Nathan's entourage next. To Kyle, financial advisor, the quotation marks audible, $5,000. With the recommendation he enroll in a course on professional ethics, as my own records show significant need. Kyle's smile died. To Sophia, the imitation handbag she'd tried to swap for Isabella's real Birkin. Sophia shrieked accusations. Nathan silenced her, furious not at the insult, but at the delay. I sat there and felt, for the first time in 20 years, a strange kinship with the woman I'd married. This wasn't a grieving widow's document. It was Isabella settling every account with surgical precision, clearing the table before the real verdict. Then Harrison reached Article 7, the Park Avenue penthouse. To Nathan, he grinned, triumphant. The Patek Philippe watch collection. Nathan laughed outright. But the single key to the safe holding them, Harrison read, had been entrusted to his father, Julian Thorne, me. The room went dead silent. Nathan's grin collapsed into fury and disbelief. What are you talking about? He's a nobody. He hasn't seen her in 20 years. I was as stunned as he was. I had no key, no idea what Isabella meant by it. But sitting there, I was pulled back 20 years, into the night that had ended everything. It was 2005, 3 in the morning, and I found Isabella in her home office, staring blankly at spreadsheets. Her company on the verge of total collapse. She'd overextended into a Caribbean resort deal, built on rot, and now banks and investors were circling, whispering the word fraud. It's over, Julian, she'd whispered. They're going to take everything. Then, out of nowhere, a lifeline appeared, an anonymous private equity group offering $100 million in immediate rescue. Isabella wept with relief, but I was an architect. I could read a contract like a blueprint, and buried in the fine print was the truth. It wasn't an investment. It was a money laundering scheme, using inflated construction contracts to wash dirty money through her company's name. When I told her, she came undone completely. If she refused, bankruptcy and fraud charges. If she accepted, she'd be complicit in laundering, and terrified, above all, that Nathan would grow up the son of a convict. She begged me, collapsed on the floor, sobbing that she couldn't lose everything she was. So I made the choice that defined the rest of my life. I told her to go to bed. I would handle it. I built the shell companies, Thorne Construction, Thorne Project Management, and became the invisible hand moving through Zurich, Dubai, the Caymans, signing the inflated contracts, approving the fraudulent invoices, laundering the money myself, while Isabella stayed the company's clean, celebrated face. For 2 years I lived a double life to keep her safe. Then the FBI came, not for her, for me. They had my name on every document. They offered me a deal, give up the real organization behind it. I could have told them everything, could have explained Isabella's desperation, her tears, her begging. Instead, I confessed to something smaller, negligence, falsified records, and let them believe I'd acted alone. I lost my architect's license, my reputation, my name became a punchline. And that's when 22-year-old Nathan, home from Yale, saw his opening. He ran to his mother with a simple, easy story. Your husband betrayed you, embezzled from you, humiliated you. Isabella, safe and whole again, chose the version that made her the victim. She let him believe it. She let the whole world believe it. She never said a word in my defense. She just let me burn. Harrison's voice cut back through the memory. Everyone in the room was staring at me. Nathan, pale with suspicion, demanded to know what she'd given me, convinced this was some scheme. I don't know what you're talking about, I told him. It was the truth. He recovered fast, sneering that he'd simply drill the safe open, that it didn't matter. Enough of the games, Harrison. Get to the money. Harrison, unbothered, adjusted his glasses, and turned the page with theatrical slowness. Article 8. The disposition of the primary estate. Nathan leaned forward, a single coiled muscle of greed. To my ex-husband, Julian Thorne, Harrison read, I give and bequeath the sum of $15, to be paid in cash, to cover the cost of the bus ride home. Nathan's breath left him in a roar of pure, ugly triumph. He stood, laughing, crying real tears of malicious joy, pointing at me, while Kyle and Sophia scrambled to laugh along, desperate to get back in his favor. He peeled a 20 from his wallet and threw it on the table in front of me. There. Don't say I never gave you anything. Go back to your sawdust shed, old man. He grabbed his jacket, already halfway to the door, already calling out for Harrison to send the paperwork to sign. Mr. Thorne, Harrison's voice cut through the room like ice. Please sit down. I have not finished reading. The color drained from Nathan's face. Harrison reached into his briefcase and produced a second document. A thin manila folder sealed in red wax. A codicil, he explained, signed and notarized 3 weeks before Isabella's stroke, superseding every article that came before it. Attached was a full, independent psychiatric evaluation confirming her sound and superior mental competence, preempting any claim that she hadn't known what she was doing. Then Harrison began to read, and his voice became Isabella's. A letter to her son. She confessed everything, the 2005 collapse, the laundering scheme, the truth that Julian had taken the entire fall to protect her and their son, sacrificing his name, his license, his life, while she stood by and let Nathan believe his father was the villain. I was a coward, she'd written, and I let you become this, a greedy, empty shell of a man who mocks the very person who sacrificed everything so you could have this life. Nathan came apart in real time. He accused me of forging it, of manipulating a senile old woman, until Harrison silenced him with the psychiatric report. He begged, denied, covered his ears, and still Harrison read on, Isabella's words landing like hammer blows. The $160 million fortune existed for one reason only, because Julian Thorne had saved it. Nathan had never built anything, never sacrificed anything. He was, in his mother's own written words, a parasite living off another man's honor. Then came the final clause. Every asset, the stocks, the real estate, the full 100% controlling interest in Montoya Designs, bequeathed entirely to me. Not as a gift, Isabella had written, but as long overdue payment for the career, the honor, and the family her cowardice had destroyed. I sat frozen. It wasn't victory I felt. It was the crushing weight of an empire I'd never wanted, tangled inseparably with 20 years of stolen vindication, finally being handed back. Nathan made a small, wet, broken sound, and Harrison wasn't finished with him yet. For my son, Nathan Thorne, he read, who has already received a lifetime's worth of fortune and acknowledged none of it, I leave him precisely what he so thoughtfully offered his father. Harrison slid a single certified cashier's check across the table. $15. Bus fare. Kyle stood without a word and walked out. Sophia looked at the check, looked at Nathan's ruined face, called him pathetic, and followed. And then Nathan exploded. A raw animal scream, sweeping the table clear, glass shattering against the wall, screaming that he'd sue, that she was senile, that I was a thief and a manipulator. He lunged at me across the table. Harrison hit a button on his desk without even standing, and 2 security guards filled the doorway before Nathan made it halfway around the table. They pinned his arms and dragged him out while he screamed that he owned the building, that he'd have all our jobs, that he'd kill me. Don't forget your inheritance, Harrison called after him, nodding at the check still on the table. It broke whatever was left of him. The doors swung shut. The silence that followed was enormous. I sat in the wreckage, the overturned chair, the shattered glass, Nathan's discarded 20 beside Isabella's $15 check, utterly drained. The key, I finally asked. The watches. Why involve me in that cruelty? Harrison's face softened into something almost sad. That was your wife's final test for your son. She wanted to see if he'd humble himself enough to ask you for anything. He failed instantly. Then Harrison reached into his breast pocket and produced a small, old brass key, not for the watch safe. A different key entirely. This opens a wall safe behind a painting in her private study. Inside is the complete, unredacted 2005 file. Every wire transfer, every shell company document, every letter she wrote you, begging you to save her. He met my eyes. The money was her apology, Mr. Thorne. This key is her giving you back your name. I closed my hand around the small brass key. $160 million was a weight, a new kind of prison. But this was freedom. The truth, I've learned, has a patience all its own. It can be buried for 20 years under shame and silence, but it doesn't die. It waits. And when it finally surfaces, it doesn't just clear a name, it rewrites an entire family's history in the space of a single afternoon. Real honor was never about what the world called me. It was about what I was willing to burn for the people I loved, even when they never knew it, even when it cost me everything. In the end, a name reclaimed by truth is worth more than any fortune ever could be. What would you have done with that key and that $160 million burden? Tell me in the comments.